Don't go home. Your son is in your yard right now. I looked at my phone and froze. My heart stopped, each beat hammering in my chest like a warning drum. What did you just say? The driver suddenly turned the car, and I realized in that instant that my life was about to change forever. I stared out the window at the shadows of trees blurring in the streetlight, but my mind was already in the yard. Images of the impossible flickered through my head. My own child, a stranger in my safe space, doing something I could not yet name. I wanted to scream, but the words lodged in my throat. That moment stretched endlessly, a fragile hinge on the door to everything I thought I knew. I'm glad you're here. If you like this story, please hit like, subscribe, and comment your city below. I want to know I'm not alone. Every story matters, and your support keeps them alive. That evening, everything seemed normal. The quiet city pressed against my windows, the soft glow of streetlights outlined familiar houses, and even the faint scent of damp earth felt reassuring. Safe. Ordinary. Predictable. I left work at 11:40 p.m., pulling my coat tightly against the cold. Thomas's car was waiting, as it always did. Sliding into the back seat, I handed him my thermos of tea, its warmth comforting against the chill. He nodded, calm as ever, a quiet reassurance I had come to depend on. We drove through the familiar streets. My mind wandered to mundane concerns. Tomorrow's bills, unpaid taxes, calls to my son. But beneath routine, a thread of unease tightened in my chest, subtle and insistent. Thomas was quiet, driving deliberately. I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror, steady, composed, but tonight even his calm felt fragile. Then he slowed the car. "Margaret, have you seen that black car near your house before?" he asked. Through the windshield, I spotted the dark sedan. "Probably a neighbor's," I said, trying to sound casual, but Thomas's silence pressed heavily. I remembered small warnings I had ignored. Andrew's questions about my work, files, security cameras, a neighbor's remark about him being around when I wasn't home. Now each seemed significant. "He's in your yard, Margaret, and he knows your schedule. Tonight he's acting on it," Thomas said. My heart lurched. Every routine I relied on had failed. My safe world had fractured. Thomas's steady presence was my only anchor as I realized that the ordinary night had turned into a crucible, testing everything I thought I knew about my son, my home, and my life. As we turned onto my street, Thomas slowed the car deliberately. The familiar row of houses, the neatly trimmed hedges, and the faint glow of porch lights had always comforted me. Tonight they felt alien, heavy with anticipation. "Margaret, look there," Thomas said, his voice low. I followed his gaze. A black sedan sat just beyond my gate, sleek and motionless. Something about the way it rested there, almost like a predator waiting, made my stomach churn. "Probably just a neighbor," I said, forcing calm into my voice. But Thomas didn't respond. His silence pressed against me, sharper than any words could have been. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me a small notebook. Flipping it open, he showed me meticulous notes. Dates, phrases, references to my schedule and routines, and even observations about my home. "He's here tonight," Thomas whispered. "And he's been watching." A shiver ran through me. My son, my Andrew, someone I had trusted, nurtured, and loved for decades, was outside my house. My sanctuary, the place I had built and protected, had become a stage for an unknown threat. I thought back to the subtle warning signs over the years. Questions about my work, the safe, the security cameras, the neighbor's remark about him appearing at odd times when I wasn't home. I had dismissed these moments as curiosity, affection, or coincidence. Tonight I understood them differently. Thomas's hand rested lightly on mine, a silent anchor in the growing storm. "We're not going home, Margaret. Not tonight. We go somewhere safe." My chest tightened. Every routine I had relied on, every sense of normalcy, every expectation of safety, had been shattered. The first strike had landed, and it had come from someone I loved the most. Outside, the black car remained still, its dark shape ominous against the faint streetlight. My pulse quickened, every muscle tensing instinctively. I had spent a lifetime protecting, nurturing, trusting, and now that trust had become a vulnerability. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to relax. Thomas's presence beside me was the only constant in this sudden chaos, a reminder that even in betrayal, there could be an ally. We need to think clearly, Thomas said, his voice firm but gentle. One wrong move and this could escalate. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. My mind raced through every small detail. My son's questions, his sudden interest in my schedule, his casual observations that had always seemed harmless. Every act of trust one had extended now revealed itself as a potential risk. I felt a surge of clarity beneath the fear. I would not be naive. I would not allow the night, my son, or anyone else to dictate my fate. Every instinct, every lesson, every hard-earned insight into human nature and trust would guide me. The car moved away from my driveway, leaving the black sedan behind. My heart pounded, but beneath it was a strange calm, a determination I had not felt before. The first strike was only the beginning, and I knew I had to act decisively. The streets stretched before us, ordinary yet charged with danger. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker of light became significant. I understood that nothing in my life, the routine, the home, the past, could protect me from what was coming. For the first time I truly realized that trust, once given freely, could be the most dangerous weapon in the hands of someone I loved. And that weapon was now aimed directly at me. I glanced at the rearview mirror, catching my own reflection for a fleeting second. Tired eyes, pale skin, a chest tight with anxiety I had felt before long ago in the aftermath of loss. That fear, the one creeping up from deep inside, was familiar, even comforting in its own twisted way, because I had survived it before. Years ago I had been left alone. My husband, Thomas, gone, his absence carved into the very walls of the house, into the air I breathed. The grief had been a constant companion, sharp and unrelenting. Debt had swallowed savings painstakingly accrued over decades. My son had moved away, distant and preoccupied, leaving me with the cold echo of a house that once felt full. I had learned to work nights, taking jobs that consumed my energy, not for myself, but because survival demanded it. That was when Thomas, the driver, the steady presence in my night, had appeared. He was a quiet observer, the one person who noticed the small rhythms of my life, who understood without question. Yet even then there had been hints I had ignored. Andrew, my son, had always seemed perfect on the surface. Polite, caring, the kind of son any mother would praise. "Mom, I'll handle it," he would say, voice confident, smile disarming. But beneath the veneer of perfection, small cracks had formed. He asked too many questions about my work, about the documents I handled, about cameras and alarms. Once a neighbor had remarked casually, "Your son comes over a lot when you're not home." I had laughed it off, choosing ignorance over fear. Now, in the mirror I saw a reflection of myself I had not fully acknowledged. The familiar world outside, the streets, the trees, the darkened houses, was overlaid with tension, anticipation, danger. Every detail mattered. Every movement, every shadow, every sign of life or absence became potentially meaningful. Thomas spoke softly, as if reading my thoughts. "Margaret, he's not here by accident. He's been planning this." I swallowed hard. The ordinary fears that had filled my nights, bills, taxes, minor worries about missed phone calls, faded in comparison. What had been dismissed as innocence, curiosity, or even care on my son's part now revealed itself in stark relief. Calculation, observation, preparation. The very acts of trust and love I had extended freely had been co-opted. I remembered the day he had requested to borrow the office safe combination, claiming, "Just in case of emergency." The panic I had suppressed at the time now resurfaced, cold and clear. The times he had lingered near my desk, casually glancing at files I thought secure, were no longer innocent moments. They were rehearsals, training for what was now taking place. Thomas's quiet observation beside me became an anchor. I realized how much I had relied on his presence, his insight, his steady vigilance. Even now, I felt a small comfort knowing that he had seen what I could not, that his perspective gave me the clarity I needed to confront the threat. The streets blurred past as we approached my neighborhood. The black sedan, still parked near my gate, waited like a predator. My chest tightened further. Every decision I had made over the years, raising Andrew, nurturing him, trusting him, felt simultaneously justified and foolish. I had acted from love and necessity, and yet that same love had become my vulnerability. I thought of the lessons life had taught me. Vigilance, observation, anticipation. Every time I had survived a difficult night, every time I had navigated hardship and loss, I had learned the subtle ways to read human behavior, the quiet signs of intent hidden behind gestures and words. Tonight I would need every bit of that knowledge. Thomas finally broke the silence again. We need to stay calm and deliberate. The moment you panic is the moment he knows he has control. I nodded. My thoughts raced, but a new clarity settled over me. Fear was present, yes, but so was resolve. I had endured loss, betrayal, and uncertainty before. I had survived when others might have faltered. And now, faced with a first strike from someone I had trusted implicitly, I understood that survival would demand more than instinct. It would demand awareness, planning, and courage. I looked at Thomas, a silent agreement passing between us. The black car outside my gate was not merely a threat. It was a test, a reckoning, and I would not fail. The ordinary night, once comforting, had transformed into a crucible. Every shadow, every noise, every detail mattered. And as we drove past the familiar lamplights and hedges, I realized that the past and present were colliding in the most intimate, dangerous way. The home I loved, the son I cherished, and the life I had built were all in jeopardy. Andrew, my son, the very name that once conjured warmth, pride, and protection now felt like a warning whispered through the night. I had raised him, nurtured him, sacrificed countless hours and resources, and yet, as I watched Thomas's cautious movements behind the wheel, I understood that the person I knew, the boy I had cradled, the young man I had guided, was not the same man outside my gate. I recalled the early signs, the subtle hints I had chosen to ignore. How he had once asked to see the files I kept meticulously in my office, claiming, "I just want to understand your work better." The innocuous tone, the soft smile, the casual way he lingered near the desk, now it seemed like calculated reconnaissance. He had observed patterns, memorized routines, noted the times I left and returned, and perhaps even kept mental track of when my home was most vulnerable. There were other moments too. Questions about my security cameras, about locks, about who had access to the office. He always asked these as if concerned, as if he had my best interests at heart. Once a neighbor mentioned offhandedly, "Your son is often around when you're not home." I dismissed it at the time, a laugh to cover the unease that tickled the edges of my mind. Now the memory struck with a bitter clarity, each detail sharpening the outline of what had been hidden in plain sight. Thomas, sitting beside me, exuded calm, but I could see the tension in his posture. He had been trained to notice subtle cues, the twitch of a hand, the half-step, the way eyes shift when thoughts are dangerous. And he was watching Andrew closely. Every movement Andrew had made, every word he had spoken, was now a puzzle Thomas had partially solved for me. "Margaret," Thomas said quietly, his tone low but firm, "he's not acting on impulse. Everything he's done, all the information he's gathered, it's been planned. Tonight is the culmination." My chest tightened. Fear rose like a tide, curling through every bone and fiber. Yet beneath it, another feeling began to crystallize. Clarity. Years of life had taught me to observe, to notice the small inconsistencies, the gestures that betray intent. And now, every small detail I had overlooked in my own son's behavior was illuminated in harsh relief. The trust one had given freely, my time, my attention, my protection, had been weaponized. I thought of all the moments I had smiled at his probing questions, reassured him when he lingered too long, given him access to things I now understood he had no right to. Each act of care and trust now appeared in a new light. A potential vulnerability, a key he might use to unlock doors I had always assumed were safe. Even the mundane, everyday moments began to feel like clues in a larger design. How he had offered to help with my schedule, asked about my routines, noted which doors I left unlocked for convenience, where the spare keys were hidden. Each tiny observation now carried a weight I could not ignore. I had been blind, too trusting, and that trust was the instrument of my peril. Thomas's hand brushed briefly against mine, a grounding touch. I drew a deep breath, focusing on his calm presence. I needed to see this clearly, to act deliberately. Panic would betray me, but awareness, pure, unflinching observation, was my weapon. "He's here, Margaret. He knows the layout, your routines, and when you are vulnerable. I've seen this before." The smallest hesitation now could give him the advantage. I felt a shiver, a tightening in my chest that spoke of fear, but beneath it lay resolve. I had endured loss, betrayal, and uncertainty in my life before, and I would endure it again. Every instinct, every lesson, every observation I had cultivated over decades would be necessary now. I remembered my past, the nights spent alone, the financial threats, the small betrayals that had prepared me for moments like this. And yet, none of it had prepared me for a first strike from my own child. Trust, the most fundamental element of family, had been subverted into a threat. The black sedan outside my gate was more than a car. It was a signal, a harbinger of the breach of all boundaries I had thought secure. My son, the child I had loved, nurtured, and protected, was now the antagonist in a story I had never imagined. I tightened my grip on the thermos, my knuckles whitening. Thomas's voice, steady and calm, anchored me. We move carefully. Observation first. Action only when necessary. You will not confront him alone. The ordinary night had become a crucible. My home, my routines, my very understanding of my son, all had shifted. The red flags I had ignored now demanded attention, and I realized with a clarity that chilled me. Survival, vigilance, and strategy were the only paths forward. Every instinct sharpened. Every observation mattered. The man I had known, the child I had raised, was now an unknown adversary. And I would not underestimate him again. The moment Thomas whispered my son's name, my pulse jolted. My mind raced as the streets of my neighborhood blurred past the windshield, the familiar lamplights casting long shadows over the pavement. The black sedan was still there, silent, deliberate, its presence like a dark promise. I felt my stomach twist, the unease tightening around me in a grip I could not shake. Margaret, listen carefully, Thomas said, voice low, measured. I've driven your son a few times. He didn't know it was me. But he's been observing, planning. Tonight he's acting. I felt the words scrape against every nerve in my body. My son, the boy I had nurtured, the man I had trusted implicitly, had been cataloging my routines, memorizing my schedule, noting my habits, my vulnerabilities. And now he was here, outside my house, inside my private life. Thomas's hand brushed lightly against mine, steadying me. I gripped the edge of the seat instead, trying to anchor myself in reality. I had spent decades teaching, guiding, providing, never imagining that the very person I loved most would become a threat. Every instinct I had honed through years of life, loss, and vigilance now screamed at me to observe, anticipate, and act carefully. He slid a notebook across the console. Dates, phrases, references to my work, the hours I left and returned, details about my home. My chest tightened as I flipped through it with trembling fingers. Every small act I had once considered harmless, a routine check of the locks, a casual conversation about finances, even the times I had left keys in familiar places, had been noted, recorded, stored in a mind that had now become adversarial. He's in the yard tonight, Thomas said. I saw the patterns, the preparation. This isn't a whim. He knows when you arrive, when you leave. And he's taken action. My stomach lurched violently. I had imagined a quiet night, a routine return home, a small cup of tea, the comfort of habit. That night no longer existed. The world I had relied on, the order, the predictability, the trust, had fractured. Every shadow, every sound, every faint movement outside suddenly became meaningful. The ordinary streets, once soothing, now felt like corridors lined with unseen eyes. I tried to recall the moments I had dismissed over the years, the way he had lingered near my desk when he had helped me organize paperwork, the casual inquiries about cameras, alarms, schedules, the offhand remarks from neighbors that now felt loaded with warning. I had ignored all of them, and now their significance hit with a weight I could not deny. Thomas's calm presence beside me was a tether. I knew that in this delicate, dangerous moment, any hesitation or panic on my part could give my son the advantage. My life, my home, my privacy, all were at stake, and I had only a fraction of time to act. We don't go home, Thomas continued, voice steady. We go to the police. Not a single step closer to the house until we're safe. I nodded, swallowing hard. My lips were dry, my fingers trembling, but beneath the fear, a sense of clarity began to form. The night had become a crucible. Every lesson I had learned from life, loss, betrayal, and survival now demanded attention. Every detail mattered. My son's presence, his planning, the black sedan, the notebook, all signs of a calculated threat. I thought of the years I had sacrificed, the nights I had spent worrying over bills, The countless times I had extended trust, the sacrifices I had made to nurture a child who now stood on the opposite side of that trust. Rage, sorrow, and fear mingled, but beneath them rose determination. I would not allow myself to be powerless. Outside, the black car remained silent and immovable. I had once believed that my home was a sanctuary, a place of safety and love. Now I understood the fragility of that belief. Trust had been weaponized. Love had become a vulnerability. And tonight, I would navigate the first strike with precision, courage, and the awareness that every movement, every breath, every decision mattered. The ordinary night was gone. In its place stretched a tense, charged present, every detail heightened, every instinct sharpened. I understood with cold clarity that survival now depended on vigilance, strategy, and action guided by both fear and awareness. My son, the child I had raised, was a threat, and I would not falter. We didn't go home. Not a single turn toward my driveway, not a glimpse of the black sedan waiting like a predator in the shadows. Thomas drove us instead to the police station, the glow of its exterior lights sharp against the dark night, an unexpected beacon of authority and safety. My pulse rattled in my ears, each beat echoing the realization that the person I had trusted most was no longer a son in the way I had believed, but a potential threat in my own home. The lobby was empty, sterile, and quiet. We were met immediately by officers who understood urgency and the unspoken tension that clung to Thomas and me. He explained the situation briefly. The black car outside my house, the observations my son had made, the notes Thomas had kept. My own voice was steadier than I expected, recounting details I had tried to suppress, routine times, schedules, and patterns Andrew had memorized, each a piece of evidence of his dangerous knowledge. They checked the security footage from my home first. My heart lurched at every frame. There, moving deliberately, was my son, his hand on the lock, peering inside, cataloging my possessions, the very documents I had long assumed were safe. The silence in the room thickened with each frame. The officers exchanged glances. One whispered to the other, their expressions revealing a mixture of disbelief and concern. Then came the calls, the phone logs, the dates recorded in Thomas's notebook, and the records of my own movements meticulously detailed. It was undeniable. He had planned this intrusion. Not impulsive, not naive. Calculated. Every step orchestrated. I felt my chest tighten, a wave of nausea passing over me, but beneath it, a strange clarity emerged. The evidence was concrete. The truth could no longer be denied or softened by hope. At last, they made the call to summon my son. He arrived quickly, confusion etched across his face, a mask that barely contained agitation. My stomach turned, every instinct screaming that I was confronting the person I had known and loved in an entirely new context. He denied everything. His voice shook, but only slightly, and his words were rehearsed, measured, too controlled to be entirely truthful. He cried, he shouted, he pleaded, but each gesture only emphasized the contrast between the boy I had raised and the man before me. The officers exchanged more glances, then turned to the footage. Every frame, every angle captured the undeniable truth. Him trying to access my house, holding documents that belonged to me, reading notes he had no right to, moving through my property as though it were his own. The silence that followed was heavier than any words, louder than any scream. I could feel it pressing against me, suffocating yet liberating. Thomas's hand rested on my shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the chaos. I had spent so many years alone, protecting my home, organizing my life, shielding my vulnerabilities, and yet none of it had prepared me for this. The realization that the danger had been closer than I had imagined, hidden in plain sight, and perpetrated by the person I had loved most. The officers spoke quietly among themselves, devising the next steps. I listened, absorbing every detail, every procedure, every precaution. It was strange how official, how methodical, how concrete their actions were. Unlike the swirling fear I had felt for hours, now there was structure, certainty. The threat was real, yes, but it was being confronted, dissected, and contained. I thought of my son's eyes, the faint flicker of guilt or panic, the rehearsed words that tried to mask intent. I remembered the days he had asked about schedules, cameras, and documents. The small acts of curiosity, now illuminated by this stark confrontation, had revealed a plan that had almost gone unnoticed, almost executed without challenge. The weight of betrayal pressed against me, but beneath it, I felt something else. A rising sense of agency. I had survived years of challenges, heartbreaks, and minor deceptions. This was different, yes, but the tools I had honed over decades, observation, patience, caution, were mine to wield. I could protect myself now in ways I had only imagined. The confrontation continued. Officers mediating, my son flustered, Thomas vigilant. Each frame of video, each record, each note was undeniable proof. And as the hours passed, I realized something vital. The first strike had been contained, the truth exposed, and the power I thought lost had begun to return to me. For months we would not speak. The house would remain a fortress. But in that moment, amidst the evidence, the tension, and the unavoidable confrontation, I recognized the turning point. I was no longer the passive observer of my own life. I was awake, aware, and prepared. The night had transformed from routine into revelation, fear into clarity. And the black sedan, the first strike, the betrayal of trust, all of it had led me to this. Exposure, undeniable proof, and a pathway towards safety. I couldn't breathe properly for a long time after leaving the police station. The adrenaline ebbed slowly, leaving a hollow ache in my chest where panic and fear had once resided. My son, my own child, the person I had nurtured, trusted, and believed in, had turned into someone unrecognizable, someone capable of exploiting the bond we shared. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath it was something worse. A creeping emptiness, a sense that the years I had invested in love and care could be violated so completely. The drive home was silent. Thomas didn't speak, and I didn't ask him to. Words were useless against the magnitude of what I had witnessed. Every frame of the security footage, every detail of the notes he had taken, every calculated movement of Andrew outside my home haunted me in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was not anger alone that I felt. It was grief, guilt, shame, and disbelief all tangled into one suffocating weight. I replayed memories in my mind, the countless times I had let him into my life freely, the keys I had handed over, the doors I had left unlocked, the guidance and advice I had given without hesitation. Each act of maternal trust now seemed like a misstep, a vulnerability I had never imagined could be exploited. My home, the sanctuary I had built, the place I thought was safe, had been violated without my permission. We did not speak of the events again for months. Andrew avoided my gaze, and I avoided thinking of him as the child I once knew. The silence between us was deafening, but it was also protective. I needed space to process, to understand that my instincts had been right all along and that vigilance, not denial, was my shield. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life. Locks were changed. Security cameras were installed. Motion sensors and alarms ensured that no one could enter unnoticed. Thomas remained a steady presence, a constant in the sea of uncertainty. He helped me navigate the aftermath, guiding me to safety without ever overstepping or undermining my authority. At home, each corner of the house reminded me of vulnerability, but also of resilience. I had survived the first strike, exposed the threat, and built defenses strong enough to keep myself safe. It was not a return to normalcy. It was a reordering of priorities, a reclamation of agency and autonomy that I had long taken for granted. The fear gradually receded, replaced by a quiet resolve. I understood now that the world could betray even the most intimate bonds, that trust could be weaponized, and that love alone was insufficient to guarantee safety. But I also realized that awareness, preparation, and deliberate action were powerful tools that allowed me to survive and to protect myself. Every night, I slept knowing my home was secure, that my boundaries were respected, and that my life, though irrevocably changed, was once again mine to govern. The emptiness remained as a cautionary echo, but it was tempered by strength. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the people we love most can become the source of our deepest threats, and yet survival depends on courage, clarity, and the unwavering commitment to protect oneself first. In the weeks that followed, my life began to settle into a new rhythm, one forged by awareness and reinforced by boundaries. The house, once a space where I had felt both comfort and vulnerability, became a fortress. New locks clicked into place, security cameras kept watch, and the alarm system, though loud and intrusive, offered reassurance. Every precaution I had ignored in the past now felt necessary, and every small adjustment contributed to a growing sense of safety. Thomas remained by my side, not as a guardian, but as a steady companion. He had been with me through the chaos, observing and assisting without overstepping, and his presence became a reminder that trust could exist when earned, rather than assumed. Sunday dinners became our ritual. Simple meals, quiet conversation, a sense of normalcy that was earned through vigilance and experience. His son occasionally joined, bridging gaps I hadn't realized needed mending. I felt for the first time in months that family could exist without fear. Financial security, once a source of stress, became a tool of empowerment. I reassessed my accounts, tightened access, and reclaimed control over the resources that had once been exploited. Each precaution, each careful step, was a reminder that independence could coexist with connection, and that boundaries were not barriers but protection. Yet the emotional reward ran deeper than locks and alarms. I have faced betrayal from the person I loved most, confronted fear that had been hidden in plain sight, and emerged aware, vigilant, and resilient. My instincts had guided me when routine had failed, and my capacity to act decisively had ensured my safety. That awareness was the true reward, the knowledge that I could navigate danger without being paralyzed by it, that courage and foresight were powerful allies. Evenings grew calmer, though I remained observant. Each night I moved through my home with the knowledge that I was prepared, that every space was secure, that every routine was informed by experience. Fear no longer controlled me. It sharpened my focus, reminding me of what could happen if vigilance waned. I thought often of my son, of the betrayal, and of the months of silence that followed. It was painful but necessary. Distance allowed reflection, and reflection reinforced boundaries. I had been naive in the past, but the lessons were now etched deeply into my consciousness. Trust, once blind, was now deliberate. Love, once unconditional, was now tempered by discernment. My home, my sanctuary, my life had been rebuilt. Not as it was before, but stronger, more intentional, and more protected. Each precaution, each ritual, each conscious step reinforced the clarity I had gained. Safety and agency were not luxuries, they were necessities. And yet, there was something quietly comforting in this new order. The world felt less fragile, less threatening, and yet more real. I could breathe, plan, and exist without the shadow of betrayal hanging over every action. For the first time in a long while, I could sleep with a sense of calm, knowing that I had reclaimed both my physical space and my emotional strength. This new order was my reward. Vigilance balanced with trust, independence balanced with companionship, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, no matter what came, I had survived, and I would continue to survive. This story taught me one thing: danger rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly through routine, through trust, through the small patterns we overlook. Awareness, vigilance, and listening to instincts are what save lives. Protect your boundaries, cherish the people who truly see you, and never ignore the signs that something feels off. Names and some details have been changed for safety. Now tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Do you trust the people around you? Subscribe for more true stories, because sometimes learning from others' experiences is the best way to stay safe.